So in the next sort of 1 hour, we are going to look at the concept of coaching. And I have changed the name of the session a little. And this happened at a last minute because when I looked at it again, I realized that when I think about coaching, and when I think about coaching leaders, I always think about impact, right? So, what was our intent and what is our impact? So, creating maximum impact is what I wanted to speak about. So, it is a topic which is very personal. And this was the first time that I actually wrote down how I got here. So it is my journey, and it is my learning in terms of where I am today, and where I think, we still have a ways to go. So, what I thought I would do was tell you a little bit about where I started and my own journey. And Professor Xavier knows part of this. Some of you know my father. And my background in education, I thought was actually quite normal, but it wasn't. Because in my case, I grew up with a father who is a diplomat, who was India's ambassador to several countries and retired from Switzerland as our ambassador. I thought that was quite normal because I grew up in that environment. So it was, sort of continental Europe, meeting a lot of different types of people. And that education was unique. But at the same time, we had the overlay of, being Indian and representing India. So there was a lot of that understanding also. I also had cross-cultural sensitization from, as a child. So from sort of the age of 4 or 5, I remember all my friends being from different parts of the world. So nationality, religion, language, it didn't matter. We all sort of fit in. And that was what I saw from day one. So I never thought that was unusual. And then I studied, sort of English literature. I mastered in business communication, but I still was at a phase where I didn't know what I really wanted to do. So I tried out different careers. And then in 2004, I came back to India. And I got into a space called corporate training. And at that time, corporate training was sort of broad. It was about, professional skills, business skills, getting a lot of people who are working for multinationals to feel comfortable communicating across the globe, and just making that kind of impact. So when I walked into this, I had perhaps what they were looking for, which was language skills and presence, but nothing more than that. So it started with me learning from scratch. So I actually picked up the skill and the craft from scratch, and I started doing corporate training across the board. So I think I work 7 days a week. Worked across the country, worked across parts of, sort of Far East Asia, etc. So a lot of experience when it came to being able to facilitate dialogue. And then 2008, I moved to Bangalore, which is where I live today. And I took up a role in learning and development at Goldman Sachs. Now, for various reasons, that was my dream job. I always wanted to work for a company like Goldman. So that was fascinating. Plus, L&D was a leap of faith. I actually didn't know that much about learning and development. I was a good corporate trainer, but I didn't know much about this particular part of the business. So when I joined, I learned a lot in terms of, what do we do when it comes to partnering with a business, understanding how leaders progress, how they develop, and what it means to think about things like coaching and mentoring. So it was really for me a baptism through fire, and I learned a lot. And I went through that process for about 10 years. I also figured out during the course of that journey that I enjoyed the facilitation of dialogue and I enjoyed coaching. So, coaching for me became something that I understood. I understood what was the need for it. I understood why we needed to make sure that within a structure like a corporate environment, you needed to include these aspects. They were fairly new at that time, but I think as it became more and more structured, it made more and more sense for me. So L&D and running a global organization, I saw what it was to be a global leader, a manager, a coach, and an employee. So all aspects of how it is to sort of work in a business, I did pick up. And then in 2019, I decided that I wanted to actually come out and be a freelancer. So, like I mentioned, there were two areas that I enjoyed, the facilitation of dialogue, as I call it, and coaching. And that really became my independent life and what I now am doing, which is having conversations like this with different audiences. So it's been exciting. So that really got me to a point of asking you a question. Actually, here's this very colorful screen that you have in front of you, and I've put these names up. I hope you recognize all of them. What do they have in common? What do you think they have in common? And I'd love to hear from you if you can even use chat. Can we use chat?
Yes, they can.
We can, or you can speak up. Tell me, what do you think they have in common? This group of people you have, from Federer to Obama, Sania Mirza, what do you see in common here?
Achievers.
Achievers, yes.
Passion, passion to what they are doing.
Passion to what they're doing, absolutely. Anything else?
Focus, dedication, perseverance.
Focus, perseverance, absolutely.
They all had coaches.
They all have?
Coaches.
Thank you. You answered my question. Thanks. You segued in perfectly. Yes. The reason I brought them all up, and I was thinking of, who is the most successful in which field. You look at this group of people, do they need a coach? Right? And I think that's why I always come back to this, because here is a group of people who are better than anyone at what they do. So why do they need a coach, right? Is the coach going to be better at the skill than them? We don't know. And in most cases, that's not true, because these guys are the best. But they still require someone as a coach who can help them think about how they are performing. So for me, it's always a moment of truth, and that is what binds all these people. And if you think of anyone who is successful, in fact, as they become more and more successful, they probably have more need for a coach than they did earlier. So for me, this is a good reminder. So what is coaching, right? And I like to make it very simple so that everyone understands. We're a large group on this call. And I don't know what will resonate with each one of you. But when I think of coaching, and there's many ways of describing it, you looked at the screen earlier, there were, most of coaching comes from sports, from army, from, places where there's a certain discipline and a way of developing and performing. That's really where a lot of this comes from. But for me, the definition that I was looking for is similar to what you see here, which is, to me, coaching is to help a person change in the way that they wish to, right? And in the direction they want to go to. That's really imperative. So making sure that you understand that that is what coaching does. It is the journey that you take with an individual, which is based on their wish and the direction that they want to go to. It empowers change. So the idea of coaching is really to ensure that people find the choices that they want, and they discover it through their own journey. So it empowers the fact that you can figure out how you want to approach a particular situation. I've put here something which I use a lot, which is called the GROW model. And if you've ever been a manager, even as a manager in a company, you will come across the GROW model when you have to coach your team members. And the GROW is, to me, the 4 questions that are mentioned, which really encapsulate what we mean when we say coaching. What do you want? Where are you now? What could you do? And what will you do? And these 4 questions, right? It doesn't have to go in the sequence, but if you think about those, they're extremely powerful when it comes to being able to help someone as far as coaching is concerned, right? It is getting someone else to feel that they understand what they have to do next. So it is about the goal, setting a goal, thinking about where we are today, figuring out the options, and then thinking about the way forward. So for me, something that I always think of, and it comes into my mind the moment I think of coaching. But if you take anything away from this, it is the understanding that coaching is about the other person. It is about making sure that they know how they want to go about their future and how they want to approach it, and not about you. So for me, that is interesting. Another piece that I think is something that very often in coaching we hear a lot of the conversation around, oh, is this coaching, is this mentoring? There's a lot of confusion around the language, and I think people get confused with that. So I feel it's important that you understand what each one of these bring in terms of expertise, right? So that if you ever need this kind of help, you know who to reach out to for what. So as we talked about earlier, coaching is really about helping someone get to where they want to. And that's really asking questions to explore opportunities and help reach a goal. So you are helping someone in the journey that they are making. Counseling and therapy, so clearly that is based a lot more on the understanding of psychological situations. So if someone is actually going through a personal situation, which is manifesting in a psychological manner, a counselor, a therapist, they are clearly the experts when it comes to handling those kind of scenarios, and they know what they need to do. So that's a different area altogether. Then you have what's called mentoring, and mentoring is something that I do a lot of, but that's when I switch gears to giving advice. So mentoring is really sharing your own experience and giving advice to people about what they should sort of think about. right? It's going to someone. My mentor is my father. I listen to his advice, I take it, and then I use it in a manner which makes sense to me. So that's very different from the idea of coaching or counseling. But important to remember the difference, because if we are talking about any of these areas, it's important to keep sort of the sanctity in mind. So I thought that was important for you to know. So, and there are many reasons for coaching, right? And coaching is something that, to the point made earlier, it isn't as, I would say, it isn't part of the fabric of a corporation as much as it should be in India. It is becoming more of it. I became a certified coach about 4 or 5 years ago, and it had started to become something that people were expecting in organizations, especially at a leadership level. They were expecting to have some kind of coaching as part of integrations into new roles, but it's still nascent. It is definitely something that needs to continue to be talked about, and people to understand better. But I would say that, when I was looking at why we need coaching, and leadership today is something that I was looking at points that mattered to me, right? And it's there will be things that will be added and deleted, but for me these were ones that really stood out. So I think as a leader today, why do you need to think about just your performance? You're paid to think. So today you're paid to think and not do, and just do. So it's not about just executing. It's not about just, here's the instruction and I'll do what I have to do and I don't need to think further. Today you're paid to think. And I would say that given an environment with the pandemic, with the situation that we're facing today, it is even more imperative to think about this aspect, which is, how are you going to be strategic about life today? What does business look like today? How do we actually handle day to day? And that's what we are being paid to do, right? So it's clearly as a leader something that you can't avoid anymore. You are going to manage people who are, as I remember at Goldman, we used to say, either as smart as you or smarter. So yes, you are going to manage brilliant minds. You're going to manage people who understand things far faster sometimes than you do. And therefore, when you have to think about their future and performance, you really have to think about where they should be. And it really does stretch the way that we think about performance. But you are going to have to deal with people who will not just be comfortable with doing the basics. They are looking for challenges and opportunities. So, managing them and leading them is very much part of how you think of your role. Expect to understand the needs of generation Y and Z, and these numbers will continue. I don't know what happens after Z, but really we need to think about connecting with each of these generations, ensuring that we understand what they need, and making sure that they're motivated, making sure that you're on top of what is needed generationally, and how we think about leadership overall. Performance is just tip of the iceberg. So, thinking about more than the performance, what makes someone really perform? And that performance is the output. What is really happening behind the scenes is important for you to understand. So as a coach, as someone who's actually getting to understand the values, understanding what your team is capable of is super important. Need to answer the leadership crisis. So, here we are in a situation where, we've also looked at leadership for a long time. And there are certain methods that are tried and tested. And we've come to a point where we need something different. And I think today, in the world today, it is imperative that you look at change, and the leaders that can embrace change, can really look at what they can do next, is going to be that set of leaders that are successful. The last one, which I really feel strongly about, is do not think for others. So as much as we'd like to, and this comes up later, it's a lot to do with coaching. Do not think for others. Let them think for themselves. I think we find it increasingly, sort of this hunger to tell people what they need to do and how they need to behave. So for me, that's what leadership looks like today. And that's mainly the landscape we're talking of when it comes to coaching. So from coaching, and I can tell you that all this comes from, for me, the space where I got my coaching certification. So all of us have different schools of thought when it comes to coaching, and they are based on certain principles. So the one that I'm inspired by is the one that I was given my certification on, and that is Neuro Leadership Institute. So if you're interested, you can read more about it. And there is a man by the name of David Rock. The book is called Quiet Leadership. So if you are interested in the book, I have it right here, Quiet Leadership. And for me, that is what I believe works really well when you think of the philosophy of coaching. Is there an echo?
No, it's fine.
Okay, good. All right. So thank you. So for me, so when I was looking at coaching and how we go about it, I thought about the principles that, as I said, were the ones that I looked at when I was going through my coaching certification. So like I said, quiet leadership is based on 6 steps of transforming performance. And these principles are, to me, when I think of you either being the coach or the coachee, it doesn't matter. When I'm thinking about the concept or the principle of why we do coaching, this makes sense to me. So the idea is really from that premise. So think about thinking and not telling, but asking. So for me, the first thing that, David Rock talks about is think about thinking and getting people to think for themselves. So this is moving away from telling people what they need to do to asking them to think about where they are and how they want to go about it. So this think about thinking, right? And it sounds very normal and very commonsensical, but most of the time, if you notice in life, we are telling people how they need to think about a situation. And there's very little asking and very little waiting for them to tell us anything. So it comes from that perspective. I think for me, the first thing that I learned when I was going through coaching was this piece, which was, wow, I actually have to allow someone to tell me how they feel. And I should not be telling them what to do. And I should not be telling them how to go about a situation. So this was, to me, the biggest paradigm shift at the initial stage. So think about thinking, not telling, but asking them questions and getting them to a stage where they are really thinking about their situation. Listen for potential, and this is another principle which I talk a lot about in leadership. It is really the question of how good are we as listeners? Do we really listen? And I don't know about my group here today because I can't see you in person, but I hope you are listening. But it really does mean thinking about what people are telling us, reflecting on what people are telling us. So, the whole aspect of listening for potential, getting people to tell us how they feel about their situation, and genuinely understanding what we want to do with that is an art in itself. I spend a lot of time telling leaders how to be better listeners, and I never thought I would be doing that, but that clearly is one that people need. Speaking with intent, getting people to just focus on what needs to be spoken about, right? So if you think about the aspects of coaching, this is the meat of it. It's getting an understanding of what are the questions, what are the things you want to focus on, and how do you make sure that it is done with intent and focus. So how you go about that is really another process that's part of coaching. And then getting the insights that you want to get out of that conversation. So like I said earlier, it isn't about telling someone what they need to do. It is asking them questions and getting them to the point where they will discover it on their own, right? And that's really how you get them to have the insight. And then finally, whatever it is that you need to do, you need to create a new thinking. If they need to create a new habit, or you need to create a new way of exploring something or handling a situation, that is creating that new thinking and then following up with that. As principles, these happen together. It's not that these are happening one after another. But when I think of coaching and what I've understood about um, how to approach this topic, it is about two people having a conversation where I will play the role of someone who handles the listening and the thinking and helping you and supporting you in a way which is not about handling the whole conversation, right? So I'm not going to steer it. You're steering the conversation, and I'm helping you steer the conversation. And I think for me, these principles have made a difference. So if I look at any of us in any walk of life, we can apply these to our life. And then, if at any point you feel like you want to become a coach, or you think that this is a career that you would like to understand better, right? Some of us just naturally are good at listening to people and helping them and advising them. And sometimes we just feel that this is something, I would like to understand better and help people. So how do you become a coach, right? And there are various things, but these were the ones that when I was putting this together, I said, this is so important. And if you have this, then the rest of it will happen. So you need to love the human mind and behavior. So understanding a little bit of the neuroscience, understanding psychology, understanding how we respond to situations, you need to be excited about that. And understanding how behavior can impact environments and impact development. Just being fascinated by that also is something that can make a big difference to taking this up. You need to be comfortable knowing that it's about the other person. So, coaching and anything that includes this kind of dialogue is about the other person. So, you want to make sure that you're comfortable observing other people and being comfortable knowing that they are just fascinating, and you have something that you want to understand about them. Unlocking potential and making sure that you, again, the journey of seeing someone do well in something, being able to see them take on a new role and do well in that role because you've helped them as a coach in some manner. Just that whole exploration is fantastic, and if you enjoy that, then this is a space for you. Of course, there are different groups that are out there. So there's something called the ICF, which is your coaching federation, the International Coaching Federation, and there's a couple of other institutes that will certify you as a coach. And I've gone through one of those programs, so I think it's worth it. And the one I went through was called Neuro Leadership Program. And then I think that, when I think of coaching and I think of how I'm exploring it today, there's a lot of the pieces which, to me, augment and become part of the journey that I take with an individual. And some of these things are useful. So for example, I'm certified on a variety of different tools. There's psychometric tools, the ones I've mentioned here. For example, Hogan, Strength Finder, HBDI, MBTI. They're helpful to be able to sort of have a conversation which is more specific with my coachee. And I use this a lot. It helps us understand what we need to do as we go forward in development. EI is perhaps my philosophy for everything, emotional intelligence and understanding how we can manage our, sort of self-management and our social management. Someone mentioned NLP earlier. So yes, it's another tool that really is augmented when you think of coaching. The ideas of mindfulness today, when you think of the environment we're in, it is clearly one where we think of just mental well-being, understanding how we can stay calm and centered, and what are the things that we can use to stay like that and just get through this phase that we're in today. So there are lots of things that can be part of the coaching, just repertoire. And I think each coach has a different way of handling it, and each sort of coachee is unique in the way that they come and approach a coaching conversation. So together, I think this is what I wanted to share with you, and I'm kind of done with my main presentation. This is when I wanted to stop, ask if you guys have questions, and take it from there.
Thank you. Now, participants, you can ask questions. Question and answer session.
Ms. Jyoti, thank you. Thank you for the insight. One is there an age group for the coaching should be done? One. Second question is there a time period for this coaching? And how do you really get
Ma'am, you can switch off the screen sharing.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the third question. I heard.
Yeah, the third question is how do you open up? See, for coaching, I mean, you need to really open up and tell your weakness or the personal challenges also, because some of it could be around that.
Yeah. Can you repeat your first question? Sorry.
Yeah, is there an age group, right age? Because as we age, it becomes difficult to change our habits and behaviors.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think you're absolutely right. There is no age group, by the way. There's no age group. And I have found that what's interesting about coaching is somewhere along the way, when you make a big jump, and I'm talking about the corporate world, when you become a leader where you have a lot of responsibility, And all of a sudden that happens sometimes in your journey. So you may go from an individual contributor to a people manager, or you get a position which is a large jump. That is when I think people recognize the importance of needing a coach, right? Because all of a sudden you need to work on areas which you may not have thought of earlier. Because all of a sudden you need the communication skills, you need the influencing skills, you need to make impact, and so on and so forth. So interestingly enough, I think the age group is across the board. The earlier the better, but I think the criticality is when you are more senior. Yeah. Sorry, your second question, sir.
How long is a coaching session? Is it lifelong, or is it a specific?
No, I think you can choose to keep it to 5 or 6 sessions, which are just 1 hour. It's painless, hopefully, so that you don't have to have it for too many years. I know of people who have kept coaches, throughout their career because they just, and I'm sure you've had them in your life. It may not be even a professional coach, but it's someone in your family, it's someone that you admire in life. They stay through your life.
Hello, I am engineer Balakrishnan. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It is commonly noted that you see, particularly in sports, when the people are not performed well in their activities, then they become the coach. What do you say about it?
I think some people would say that, they've. So I have a lot of friends who retire from the corporate life and become coaches.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you need experience. So I think either ways, failure or success, it makes you a good coach, right? So I feel like it's a combination. It's a combination of people.
Coaching can go along with the activity, like referees and all.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Yes, Miss Jyoti. Miss Jyoti, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, I can.
Hello,
Yes.
Miss Jyoti.
Yes.
I am Colonel Pratap. A good friend of your parents for a very long time.
Hello,
Anyway,
sir.
your talk was excellent.
Thank you.
And really a tough subject. A tough subject, that is coaching the executives. It is not an easy task in any way.
Not at
Executives, as
all.
you know that. Yeah, it is absolute. And you're really undertaken a very tough job. And your talk was really educative and illuminating. And we really enjoyed it. There is no doubt about that. Thank you so much, Ms. Jyoti.
Thank you, Uncle. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joy Joseph.
Hello, sir.
You mentioned about the MBTI. Theoretically, I've seen that's a very good tool. I just want to know from you as a practitioner, how effective it is practically.
So, Joy, sir, I would say that, for me, and I'm not going to lie to you, right? None of this is black and white. It's not. So no psychometric will ever be black and white. And what it does is it gives us an indication of our immediate current environment, how we feel about an immediate current environment. So when you look at that, and the reason that we use it, for example, in a company, and you use it with your team, you immediately get a profile. It's not going to be 100%.
That's right.
And it's also based a lot on many other factors, right? What was your mood when you took the test, etc., etc. There are many things that become part of it. But it tells us how you feel about your, just the way that your interpersonal reactions, the way you go about your day, right? So that is enough for me to at least be able to do something about the team dynamics.
Okay.
And that way I can think about my leadership team. If you're my leadership team, then I know I have this sort of, group of people who fit a certain kind of behavioral pattern. And that's useful information.
Yeah,
It's
that
not
gives
meant to be 100%.
that gives a broad kind of guideline,
Correct.
though it may not be very specific.
Yeah. And that's good enough, because that makes me, and also more importantly, it makes it easier for you guys to know each other. So if I look at the group together and I say, oh, so and so is more this manner or that manner, there's 16 dichotomies, there's 16 different types of personality types within MBTI. So if I'm looking at all of those, I can then say, wow, I have these kind of people, and therefore it makes it easier for me to think of work allocation and the future. So I think they're useful.
Thank you. And I will have to add, the impact of your session was great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Jyoti ma'am, there are certain questions in the chat box.
Sorry, sir.
There are some questions in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give answers to those questions?
1 second, sir.
Should I read it? Or can you go through that?
Annie Maria, my question is, who is your favorite coach or mentor you have had? What do you like? Sorry, I have to see where is Annie Maria's question. What do you like about them when you've worked with them? So thanks, Annie. Thank you. My favorite mentor, my dad. So he's been there throughout, and he's been my mentor. So yes, I would have to say that he has just, when he had to listen, he listened. When he had to tell me something, he told me. Who's my favorite coach? I would have to say that right now I have the greatest coach, because he's someone I work with, and he's working with me on my sort of making sure I'm a good facilitator and coach to my clients as a freelancer, because it's different from what I used to do. So I do have a coach right now.
And another question is from Jyoti from Indian Institute of Management Studies.
Yes, sir.
Her question is, what is the specific task or goal that feels unmanageable or unreachable?
I hope there isn't anything. You shouldn't have anything that's unmanageable or unreachable. Absolutely not. When you have to think about what you want to achieve, you have to achieve it thinking of the fact that it can happen, right? But if you want to talk separately, we can talk, Jyoti, and maybe you can tell me more about your situation.
Then another question is from Mr. Anifa Mohammed from again Elims.
Yes, Professor, what does he say?
Her question is how to be diversified leaders in the world of conditioned misogyny.
Yeah.
We are all asked to obey more than speak our minds. What is your opinion on this one?
Yeah, very good question. And I think, Arifa, it is a very tough time right now. And I agree with you that we are looking at a world which is, sort of polarized, and there's a lot of things that come out, especially I think because of social media. We see a lot of what you are talking of. I feel you still have to do your bit, right? Today, I talk a lot about anti-harassment, and I talk about, just harassment in general to a lot of companies. And I find that that small whatever session makes a difference in talking about it. So talk about it. In my opinion, talk about what it is that you need to talk about. So whatever is not appropriate, you still need to speak about and have a voice. So for me, that's what's important.
Another question is from Smita Chandran, again from ELIPS, Elite Institute of Management. I want to know whether creating self-determination is more effective than coaching to help you achieve this.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. I think I want to know whether creating self-determination is more effective than coaching to help you. I like how you put it, and I think that it's something that goes both hand in hand, right? So you're creating your own who you are, and those could be part of the goals that you want to achieve, right? So I think they can fit together, and you don't need to make them as two different aspects of your life and your journey. So I would just say, think about combining the two and achieving them together.
Thank you, ma'am. Excellent presentation. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank
Ma'am,
you.
Jyoti ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your nice presentation. I need a query. It's not a query, a comment from your side.
Yes.
Because many corporates, especially those corporates which are formed in, I particularly mentioned about Thrissur, formed in Thrissur and grown in Thrissur and moved out of the state and moved out of India. Now what happens is that a lot of direct recruitment in the top brass is happening from the new generation companies.
Okay.
And they are trying to implement the policies of new generation companies without considering or without taking into account the philosophy of this particular corporates. But so this created a lot of conflict between the management and the staff, because the staff has grown from by learning the philosophy of these particular companies. I mean big corporates, and there is a lot of conflict between the staff and the management because they are trying to implement those new generation company tactics without considering the philosophy of that particular corporate. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, no, and I think it's going to take some more conversations to figure it out. Firstly, it's the worst thing to do, right? Is to impose one way of doing things to another, and it never works. If you look at history of any company, they clearly don't work when they do it in that manner, right? The idea of sort of imposing and not adapting, rather than sort of, you're not supposed to adopt the culture, but you're supposed to adapt the culture based on where you are. And I think both sides need that that cultural sensitization, especially those that are so in between this. You should have someone who actually handles change. So I'm happy to talk to you later if you want to know. What normally happens in these situations is that there is a change management. And if you are looking at change, then there is a process you have to follow, right? And the things you need to do in order to communicate and in order to make sure that both parties are going to be able to just blend and how things are going to happen. Because a lot of this is based on the fact that no one is communicating, right? And I think that that's why we need to have a third party that actually does a lot of this and helps people sort of move and do the change management. But it's a larger conversation.
Yeah, but things are getting slower, and the ultimate impact Now it's reached to such a level that they are unable to cope up. The staff is unable to cope up with the pressure which they never experienced, and they would like to take, even you won't believe, voluntary retirement. So
I can imagine, because that's not unusual, right? When we are in a situation like this, at the end of the day, no one works for a salary. They work for the environment. They work for the people. And if they are going through a crisis like this, it's bound to happen.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your comment.
There is a last question from Mr. Balakrishnan. He would like to know more about change management.
Sure, absolutely, Bala. At some point, we will have the conversation. Just my thoughts around, what is change, and we can have that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think there are no more questions.
Hi,
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, brilliant.
Any questions? This should be the last question.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Paul Matthew. I live and work in the UK. So my question is not well formed in my own mind, but I'll try to ask it as best as I can.
Of course.
So what I'm seeing and learning with my Indian colleagues here is we move up the organization to a certain level, and beyond a certain senior level, it is a lot more soft skills. And with the culture that we have learned in India, where we are about getting a job done, it is much more softer culture in the West. It is a lot about communication. It is a lot about gathering the people and taking them in a direction. And the pace at which we can change by ourselves to fit in with that role is usually slower than what the role demands. Is there a way that I and my friends or everybody who finds ourselves in these situations can traverse that change in a reasonable frame of time to be effective leaders? Because we're good at what we do in our technical ability, but to take the whole team around to where we want to, we also need to understand how to work with them. How is it possible to traverse from where we are now to where we should be, especially in a foreign culture?
I think you possibly do a good job just by hearing you, because I think the fact that you even realize that it is required, right? It is. So I actually don't like the word soft. It's because I think it's a hard skill, and it's a required skill, right? So to the point you made about being a leader, what actually is the differentiator between a successful leader and one that's not is the ability to influence outcomes. And you know how to do it. You know how to do it. I think it's a question of articulating it. And just realizing that whatever you're thinking in your head, because I think we think about our people a lot. We think about just what they're suffering and what they're going through a lot, but we don't say it out loud, right? So just the fact that you can say it out loud and make people feel comfortable and make people feel motivated is enough, right? So these are small things that take you through that transition. So I feel like you, sir, can easily do it.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Jyoti. That's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. This is end of the session, and TMA has a great appreciation, and TMA is grateful to you, ma'am, for the efforts which you have taken for doing this.